Architectural Artcast.
A few years back, I had an experience I think most people can relate to. I ran into a lady I used to know back when I was a teenager. We met sometime around ninth grade. After we'd been talking about how our lives had been going, her family, her kids, my wife, she tells me, back in the day, I always liked you. If you would have asked me out, I would have said yes. And my reaction was, this would have been good information to have had, say, when I was like 16. After she was through falling all over herself laughing, I said, you were one of the popular pretty girls, student council, all that stuff. You had guys chasing you all over the place. Yeah, we were friends. We hung out together all the time, but it never even crossed my mind that you might be interested in me in that way. And she said, yeah. If you had shown any interest, I would have been the one chasing you. Being a teenager, who'd want to go back to that? Y'all see, when I was a teenager, I was so painfully shy and socially awkward. I had a nasty habit of every time I opened my mouth, I'd put my foot in it. I could consistently say the exact wrong thing at the worst time. My solution to this problem? I just didn't talk. I would sit back, watch, and listen. And 9 times out of 10, people would forget I was in the room, just the way I liked it. Here's where things get interesting. My friend, she also struggled with lack of self-confidence, poor self-esteem. We have a very pretty young lady who's overcompensating for her lack of self-confidence, lack of self-esteem by constantly seeking public approval. Meanwhile, one of her friends is doing everything in his power to avoid public attention. The joke of it all? She interpreted my silence, my willingness to avoid the limelight, as extreme self-confidence. She thought I was so comfortable in my own skin, I didn't need other people's validation, which to her was mind-blowing. By the time we were seniors in high school, this pretty popular member of the student council, part of National Honor Society, cheerleader, yada, 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 had started to develop a thing for her quiet friend who she thought oozed self-confidence. Why didn't we get together? We were awkward, insecure teenagers with no self-esteem and zero self-confidence. Now, in the young lady's defense, she was probably doing everything in her power, short of kicking me in the kneecap, to let me know that she was interested in changing our relationship. Why did I miss all of my friends' signals, outside of the angsty teenager stuff? That's around the same time I lost my mentor, my father. I no longer had an older person with more life experience who I could go and talk to, who could spot things that I was missing, could say, hey buddy, you realize you have a situation on your hands, and if you don't address it, you could end up hurting somebody's feelings and not even know it, which I did. Mentors are so important. After my parents' divorce and I lost my mentor, my father, the next couple years out of high school, I walked a razor's edge. I was playing with fire. I could have gone down so many different bad paths. But fortunately for me, Pete came into my life, and he became like my second dad. At a time when my anger was telling me that the world was my enemy, and at a time when I was making, shall we say, questionable decisions on a regular basis, one of the few people that could get through to me was Pete. And he never wagged his finger or preached. He would tell me a story, and it was up to me to figure out what he was trying to tell me. And it didn't take very long before every time he'd start to tell stories, I would pay full attention, because more often than not, I was about to learn how I was screwing up again. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you all today if it wasn't for Pete. When he met a half-crazy, angry, long-haired farm boy, he saw something. I don't know what it is, but he saw something of value that was worth his time and energy. The importance of mentorship, especially for young men, is the message that comes from one of the last great animations from Disney, Treasure Planet. The quirky, steampunk-esque sailing ships as rocket ships pirate adventure animation from the early 2000s that's inspired by Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. There are a bunch of books within the Western canon, classics even, that I like to call coming-of-age stories. Treasure Island, Kidnapped, Swiss Family Robinson, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The Three Musketeers, just to name a few. What all these stories have in common is one of the main characters is a young man who's taking his first tentative steps into adulthood. In Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, we are introduced to one of the greatest villains in all of literature, and as it also turns out, one of the greatest mentors in all of literature, Long John Silver. He is a complicated and complex character. It's actually pretty amazing what Stevenson was able to accomplish. At the beginning of the story, Long John Silver is a straight-up villain. He's a pirate. He's a murdering, lying, deceitful, underhanded, backstabbing, manipulative scumbag. At the end of the story, Long John Silver is still a murdering, lying, backstabbing, manipulative, deceitful, and underhanded scumbag who's willing to do almost anything to get a piece of that treasure. But now we've become a lot more conflicted in our attitudes towards Silver. We're actually happy that he escapes with a little bit of that treasure in his pocket. Part of the reason we feel so conflicted is the man himself. Long John Silver does everything, no matter how despicable, with a twinkle in his eye and a little chuckle. He can cheat you out of your last dollar and somehow convince you he's doing you a favor at the same time. The main reason we feel so conflicted towards Long John Silver is his relationship with Jim Hawkins. At the beginning of the story, Silver wants to get close to Hawkins so that he can manipulate him in an effort to learn more about the treasure. As they get to know each other and their relationship grows, Silver becomes a father figure and mentor to Jim. He starts to guide and advise, teach. He disciplines Jim, sometimes harshly. But at all times, he actively protects Jim, even from the other pirates. It's as if there are two sides to Long John Silver, the villainous pirate and the mentor father figure, and they're actively at war with each other. It's because of this internal struggle that we, the reader, by the end of the story, aren't completely on Long John Silver's side. We can't trust him. He's so manipulative and deceitful, always schemes within schemes, planning things out multiple moves ahead. The question comes up, did Silver mentor Jim as just another part of his scheme? In case things went bad, which they did, he would need somebody sympathetic who'd be willing to help him escape, which Jim was and did. We're always left with the question, was it all part of his plan? Treasure Planet simplifies the story a little bit. Jim Hawkins is a young man who is a lost soul. Like so many little boys, Jim idolized and adored his father, constantly sought his approval. Unfortunately, Jim's father abandoned his family, took off to never be seen again. Jim was devastated. As a teenager, Jim is full of exuberance and energy. He's fearless to the point of being reckless, but he doesn't have any focus or guidance. And his exuberance has caused him to get in all sorts of trouble with the local law enforcement. Jim's constant getting in trouble with the law is straining his relationship with his mother. Jim's mother loves him dearly, and she is genuinely trying to do her best to raise him properly. But like so many single mothers, she just doesn't know how to handle an overly exuberant teenage son. She doesn't know when to be gentle and when to come down with an iron fist. Jim's not stupid. He recognizes that it's his own behavior that's putting his relationship with his mother at risk. But he's also a teenager. His guilt, low self-esteem, pride, and stubbornness won't allow him to recognize that he's in a trap of his own making. Suddenly, a stranger shows up, and just before he dies, he gives Jim a mysterious object and a warning. Don't let the cyborg have it. Just as the stranger dies, a mysterious band of pirates show up. They attack the Hawkins home and burn it to the ground. After escaping by the skin of their teeth, Jim, his mother, and a family friend realize that the mysterious object that the stranger gave them is a map to Treasure Planet, a lost hoard of pirate gold. Jim is convinced this is his one big chance to prove to his mother that he's not a complete failure. Plus, having all that treasure, being fabulously rich, that wouldn't be a bad thing either. So he convinces his mother that he and the family friend should go after the gold. Jim and the doctor, the family friend, commission a ship to go after the gold. Jim thinks that because he's commissioned the ship, that he's just going to sit back, enjoy the ride until they get to the gold. Captain's like, no, there's no dead weight on this ship. You're going to work for your supper. In fact, you're going to cook supper. Jim is put into the tender care of the cook, a cyborg named John Silver. Dun, 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 dun. Like I said earlier, Jim isn't stupid. He's immediately suspicious and wary of John Silver. I mean, what are the odds? You're warned about a cyborg just as you get the treasure map, and then one of the very first people you meet is a cyborg. One of the first things that John Silver does is save Jim from the other pirates. From the moment that John Silver met Jim Hawkins, he immediately assumed a father figure mentor role. It happened before the two of them realized the depths of their relationship. Sometimes the scars run so deep that the only way you can begin to believe in yourself again is if somebody believes in you first. Silver begins to teach Jim all the skills that he would need to become a sailor. And the whole time, Silver is telling Jim, you have it in you to be anything you want to be. You can do anything you set your mind to. Just when Jim's self-confidence and self-esteem start to grow, he's framed for the death of the first mate. All those old feelings of self-doubt and guilt come roaring back. Jim breaks down and cries. And you could argue this is one of John Silver's finest moments. He hugs Jim and he tells him, it's not your fault. You did what you were supposed to. You can get past this, and I still believe in you. Silver recognizes he's at war with himself. On one hand, he's a mentor, even a father figure to Jim. But on the other hand, he's a pirate who wants the treasure, and he needs Jim to get access to that treasure. Once Silver realizes that Jim now knows that he's a pirate, he decides to go with Plan B, take the treasure by force. Once Jim and Silver are officially on opposite sides, throughout all the battles and action, you constantly see Silver, on one hand, trying to protect Jim, but on the other hand, trying to force Jim to give him the treasure. Silver may not be able to bring himself to harm Jim, but what he is able to do is put a blade to the throats of the people that Jim cares the most about. Jim agrees to lead Silver and the other pirates to the treasure, and it's massive, beyond their wildest dreams. The only problem is that Flint, the original pirate who collected all this treasure, was just as greedy as every other pirate. He didn't want to share his treasure, even after death. So he's rigged the entire planet to blow the first time somebody discovers his treasure. When Silver is put in a position to where he has to choose between Jim's life and the treasure, Silver chooses Jim's life. When Jim is the one to recognize the only way to escape the exploding planet is to turn back around and fly through the portal that will take them to somewhere else in the galaxy, it's Silver who steps up and says, I believe in Jim. I think we should do what he suggests. When they get back to port and all the other pirates are locked up, Jim allows Silver to escape. As Silver heads off into the sunset, he leaves Jim one last parting gift, a handful of the treasure, and tells him, "Rebuild your mom's business, her inn." 2 quick points about this little detail. First, it was Silver who burnt down the inn in the first place, so Second, knowing Silver's personality, I'm willing to bet you that wasn't all the treasure that found its way into his pockets. More than likely, that wasn't even a large percentage of that said treasure that's in his pockets. Because of Jim's heroism, partially due to Silver's mentoring of him, Jim gets recommended to the Space Academy. The movie ends with Jim coming home in triumph as the local hero to his mother's rebuilt inn. In Treasure Island, Long John Silver is an ambiguous character. We don't know how he really feels about Jim Hawkins. In Treasure Planet, there is no ambiguity. When put in a position to where he has to choose between his obsession with the treasure and Jim, John Silver chooses Jim. If y'all can't tell, Long John Silver and his various derivatives have always been some of my favorite characters, favorite villains. Partially because I've always interpreted Long John Silver in 2 ways. 1, as a positive message, and 2, as a dark warning. The positive message is the drum I've been beating this entire video, the importance of male mentors for young men. As I said at the beginning of this video, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to y'all if it wasn't for Pete and a couple of other mentors who, for whatever reason, saw something of value in a wild, out-of-control young man and decided to take their time and energy and sometimes their resources and invest in me. Like so many young men, I was falling between the cracks. And let's be honest, part of the reason why I was falling between the cracks was of my own doing. Social institutions had washed their hands of me. And again, being completely honest, part of the reason why they were so willing to wash their hands of me, they were involved in shoving me between the cracks as well. Just as I started to think I would be lost in the wilderness forever, individuals stepped up, and they were the ones who, of their own free will, put me on the right path. As the cyborg John Silver illustrates, mentorship is not only important to the person being mentored. Mentorship fundamentally changes the person doing the mentoring. Funny what responsibility will do to you. Now we come to the dark warning. And it's rather ironic that Disney, considering what they've been doing here the last number of years, was the one making this warning back in the early 2000s. Social institutions, specifically education and entertainment, have been heavily involved in the demonization of masculinity over the last few years. And the blame for this has been laid at the feet of the feminization of society. I would agree with this criticism up to a point. I think something much more nefarious is going on here. We've allowed people to take control of specifically education, who are taking their hatred of men out on little boys. Little boys are being condemned for merely existing. They're being taught that they're evil by nature, and if they don't act like little girls, they're browbeaten and humiliated, and if that doesn't work, they're just medicated out of their gourds. At the institutional level, men are being systematically removed from having any influence on young boys' lives. Nature abhors a vacuum. Long John Silver, Cyborg John Silver, they both warn us. Young men they crave mentorship. They will seek out guidance. You might think you're cutting off all masculine influence to young boys. No, there is always somebody willing to step up to become a mentor to the next generation. It just sometimes that mentor just might be a murdering, lying, backstabbing, deceitful, underhanded, devious scumbag. One of the few good things to come out of the last few years, parents are beginning to understand how evil our education system has become from top to bottom. Within the context of this conversation, more parents, society at large, are becoming aware of all the evil abuse that our school systems are inflicting upon young men. And I think there is going to be a major price to pay, both good and bad. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about, and until next time, y'all be safe. If y'all are still here, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. While you're at it, why don't you like this video, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell. You can hear me yammer on about something else next time. And feel free to share this video far and wide.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.